Hello, we are the Group 3 and we are going to discuss Australia's KYC and KYP suitability process. I am Marikela Pipito and my groupmates are Samaira Jalan and Vaibhav Desai. There are three main financial regulators in Australia. First, we have AUSTRAC, which provides tools, AML, CTF guidance, and enforcement measures for entities under its supervision. The regulator was also instrumental in helping update Australia's framework for combating money laundering. Then we have the Australian Securities and Investment Commissions, the ASIC, which monitors institutions and markets to make sure they operate ethically and fairly. It regulates individual and institutional conduct and advocates for customers. Then the third one, the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority or the APRA, which oversees Australian financial institutions. It focuses on stability and safety in the financial system. Now, let's discuss the KYC process or the Know Your Client process. We have three components for this process. First is customer identification program. Next is customer due diligence. And lastly, the ongoing due diligence. So what are the KYC compliant requirements in Australia? First is the customer identity verification. Under KYC requirements in Australia, firms must identify or verify a customer's identity before allowing them to onboard and make transactions. That is, they must be sure the customer is who they say they claim to be. Customers are asked to provide documents such as passport, driver's license, proof of address, or other government-issued documentation. Next is SOF and SOW verification. Under the Privacy Act, Australian reporting entities are required to identify and verify SOF and SOW as part of their KYC processes. The third one is customer risk assessment. As part of the KYC process, Australian firms are required to carry out a risk assessment for their customers. This assessment takes into account the likelihood of the customer being involved in money laundering or terrorism financing based on factors such as the size, nature, and complexity of their operations. Then we have the fourth one, which is record keeping. FIs are required to maintain records of customer identification history and all transactions for a set period of time. In Australia, this is for the duration of the business relationship and 7 years afterwards. Under the KYC compliance in Australia, firms must keep a record of how they verified a customer's identity and what information they presented. Lastly, the fifth one, reporting suspicious activity. Firms are required by law to report suspicious transactions or activity to AUSTRAC as part of their role in investigating and preventing financial crime and terrorist financing.
The KYP, which stands for the Know Your Product. The process of KYP in Canada requires financial advisors and institutions to have a comprehensive understanding, whereas it's same for the Australia too. They provide the customers with all the necessary information, giving the complexity of many financial products. This is a consistent with Australia's emphasis on the consumer's protection and ethical financial advice. What's the elements of KYP? It's the product knowledge, knowing about your product, suitability and appropriateness, how suitable and the appropriate the product that the investor is advising to their client is, the disclosure and the transparency. What's the complexity? What's the risk? What's the fees of that product? In the next slide, we're going to discuss about the comparison of Australia and Canada's KYP. The objective of both the countries are same. They want to ensure the financial advisors thoroughly understand the products to recommend the suitable options to their clients. Whereas the regulatory body of both the countries is different. For the Australia, it's ASIC, Australian Securities and Investments Commission, and for Canada, it's IROC and the MFTA, the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, the Mutual Fund Dealers Association. The product knowledge for both the countries is same. They just want to know about the product features, risk, cost, and benefits, and the potential performance. The ongoing training, regular and the continuous training is mandatory to keep the advisors up to date, whereas in Canada it's mandatory. Full disclosure and full transparency on product risk, fees, and limitations must be provided to clients. And in Canada, advisors must clearly disclose all the relevant information, including the risk and the fees. In the next slide, there are more components that we're going to compare about Australia and Canada. The next one is the suitability, which Webab is going to discuss about.
So yes, suitability, ASIC guideline for a financial advisor. The Australian Security and Investment Commission, which is regulated the operation of the advisor, ensure that financial advice provided should be match every client's needs. So like his or her tolerance level to risk and his or her financial profile. Due to KYC obligation, advisor have evaluate clients' financial past, current, and future income, attitude towards the risk, proper knowledge of recommended product to dispense accurate and regulations compliant advice. The next slide is going to talk about the NAF. So NAF stands for a new account application form, also known as new account form. This form is filled at the time account are being created, include basic information of the client, so like the her financial condition, investment need, and tolerance risk. This gives it proper formal grounding that enables advisor to explain their reasons to clients and cut out many of dangers associated with the decision making that are not clear. It continues the key foundation of progressively carried out sustainability assessment for a personalized recommendation. So now next slide is going to talk about AML regulations.
The Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorism Funding Act 2006, which governs Australia's AML legislation, which are enforced by the AUSTRAC and aim to stop financial crimes such as money laundering and the terrorism funding. The elements of AML regulations are KYC, report suspicious matters, continuous transaction monitoring, and the AML CTF compliance program. In the next slide, we are going to talk about the ALM comparison between Australia and Canada. Both the regulatory bodies are different. For Australia, it's the AUSTRAC, and for the Canada, it's the FINTRAC. The aim of both the countries is same: to minimize the money laundering acts and the terrorism funding. The customer verification in Australia is done by the CI, the financial institutions, where they must verify the client identities, and same for the Canada. The risk-based due diligence in Australia, it's required for high risk clients such as politically exposed person, and same for the Canada. The continuous monitoring of transactions to detect suspicious activities such as transferring of funds to different countries over $10,000, and same for the Canada. The next slide, it's more components that we're going to discuss about the Australia and Canada. The record keeping in Australia, the records must be kept for at least 7 years, which says the client's identification and their transactions. And for Canada, the term is for 5 years. The financial institutions must have a comprehensive ALM and CTF program that includes staff training and the risk assessment, whereas in Canada, it must establish and maintain an AML program with the regular risk assessments. The several penalties and including fines, imprisonments for institutions failing to comply with AML regulations have to be served, whereas the Canada focuses on the penalties for the non-compliance with AML obligations. Next slide's going to talk about the PEP.
So, what is a politically exposed individual? It is someone who holds a prominent public position or role in a government body or international organization. Immediate family members and or close associates of these individuals are also considered as PEPs. PEPs often have power over government spending and budgets, procurement processes, development approvals, and grants. Examples of PEPs include heads of state, government ministers, or equivalent politicians, senior government executives, high-ranking judges, high-ranking military officers, central bank governors, or board members, or executives of international organization. There are three types of PEPs. We have domestic, which is someone who holds a prominent public position or role in an Australian government body. We have foreign PEP, which is someone who holds a prominent public position or role with a government body in a country other than Australia. This would include foreign PEPs working or residing in Australia. And lastly, we have international organization PEP, which is someone who holds a prominent public position or role in an international organization such as United Nations, the World Trade Organization, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That would be the end of our report. Thank you for listening.